outside? Should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee-Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything in the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Ask Alan, the podcast. I'm Alan Crone, the CEO of the Crone Law Firm, and I'm honored to be joined today by Memphis media celebrity, Darrell Greene, who's the anchor at Fox 13 News. And Darrell, I'll point out I'm both a lawyer and a politician. So, frequently what comes out of my mouth is laughable. So
anything you say should and can be held against you is what you're telling me.
That's right. That's right. But no, it's great to have you on. You and I have been friends for a number of years. Normally you're interviewing me about something. So this is an interesting role reversal for us both.
Yeah, you flipped the script.
Yes. Yes. Well, let me ask you this. I found out in prepping for all of this that you are from South Arkansas. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That is true. Little town called Dermott, D-E-R-M-O-T-T, population 3,468.
Salute.
Yep.
Is that, where is that in relation to, say, Mayflower or I'm trying to think of all the places. I've actually tried a bunch of cases.
Are you familiar with Arkansas? Sure. Yeah, of course. Are you familiar with Greeneville, Mississippi at all?
Yes. My wife's family's from Leland.
If you know where Greeneville is, then you go due west across the river.
Okay.
And we're about 15 to 20 miles away from the river on the Arkansas side. So it's a very small town on the, as we used to put it, the good side of the levee.
Right. So are you, would you consider yourself a country boy?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I don't have a thicker Southern accent, and trust me, you can draw it out of me. My father was in the military, and I didn't travel. I was not a military brat. I grew up, my entire upbringing was in Dermott, but my father was well traveled, and he was also in sales and in business. And he always believed that, one should speak as clearly as possible, as often as possible. So he never corrected me out of a Southern accent, but he always taught me that communication was very, very important. And to communicate to people clearly, you have to be understandable. So, that plus, I grew up doing impressions and imitations of everybody from Muhammad Ali to Johnny Carson to, you name it, Rocky Balboa. So I learned how to kind of manipulate my voice a lot back then when I was younger. I don't do impressions anymore. So please, for the love of whatever is holy, don't ask me to do an impression.
That was going to be my next question. Do a little
I could see it stirring. I could see it stewing in your eyes. But no, that's it for me. That's a little bitty town in South Arkansas. Interesting story. Stephanie Skurlock at Channel 3 and I went to high school together in Dermott, Arkansas.
Is that right?
In the middle of nowhere, we both wound up as news anchors in the exact same market.
That is amazing. That's amazing. There are a lot of high schools that produce, basketball stars, baseball stars, football stars. Your high school produces news anchors.
Yep, pretty funny. It's
Hall
really
of Fame caliber
really
news
fun.
anchors.
Yeah, her dad was our band director. And her mom also worked at the school. My mom worked at the school as well. My mom worked in the superintendent's office. Before they called them accountants and CPAs, she was the bookkeeper.
Yeah.
So, she worked there for 34 years, I believe, quite some time. So, but yeah, I'm very well versed in the Skurlock way of life too. I love Stephanie to death. But I've always thought that was kind of a quirky story that Steph and I grew up in the same hometown, just a couple of years apart.
Well, was there something about your interest? Were you interested in show business as a kid doing impressions, or where did the impressions come from?
Yeah, I don't, honestly, it all developed. My uncle was a Baptist preacher. And for whatever reason, when I was small, I really gravitated to the theatrical part of that. I thought it was cool. He could get up and speak. My dad used to work. I mean, everybody here is familiar with agricultural chemicals. I mean, if you think about the companies around here, Helena Chemical specifically, he worked for Uniroyal and Thompson Hayward Chemical, based in and out of Memphis. And he used to have to get up in front of either, a dozen farmers or maybe 400 or 500 representatives from chemical companies and talk about these chemicals. And my father was not college educated, but he was a person who could immerse himself in something, study something, and you would think he was an absolute expert, that he may have developed the chemical himself because he immersed himself that well in it. So there was a performance aspect to that as well. I was just enamored with the fact that these guys could get up and talk in public, and I was drawn to it. The news was always on in my house. Now, granted, we only had 4 stations. That was it. And that was long before Fox. So the other one was PBS. And that's where I watched Sesame Street and loved the Muppets. But my mom religiously watched the news. 5 o'clock, the evening news, the local news out of Little Rock. And then at 5:30, the national news. And I loved Howard K. Smith, Harry Reasoner, Walter Cronkite, all of those guys. I mean, you name it. I knew all those guys. And I just started to mimic them. And I would do impressions of Howard K. Smith, and everybody does Walter Cronkite. I mean, that sort of thing. And when I became a teenager, I thought that, radio disc jockeys were the coolest thing in the world. This was before MTV. TV really wasn't where I was drawn at first. And I was lucky enough when I was 15 years old, I got a job at a local radio station there in Dermot, doing Sunday afternoon from noon to 4. The general manager there, for whatever reason, he liked my voice, and he said, "Yeah, all right, we'll try you out. We'll see." And I just gravitated to it, and I enjoyed it. And I think that, that enjoyment of it kind of lends itself to a real interest in it. And you keep diving deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's really how I got into it. So, show business, yeah, no. I didn't set out to be a journalist. What I wanted to be was a sportscaster. Keith Jackson is my all-time hero. His voice, the emotion that he lent to everything that he touched, whether that was, I don't know if you remember the All-Stars on ABC.
Yeah.
He did that. He did college football. He did bowling. There was nothing the guy couldn't do. And I was just enamored with Keith Jackson. So that's really what I gravitated to.
Well, and it just shows you that there's opportunity everywhere. I mean, even in a town like Dermot, that you would think, oh, well, where can you get any kind of exposure like that? Well, there's a radio station, and you were able to, you had a talent, and you were able to exploit it in your own hometown.
Yeah, and I was lucky too, because there was a programming director there by the name of Larry Dean, and Larry was one of those guys. He worked in Little Rock, he worked in Nashville, and he retired in South Arkansas to take over for this, this rather, it was a small radio station. Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, it was 50,000 watts AM and 100,000 watts FM, which is, that's a fire breather. Those are the legal limits. But, the footprint, the revenue, all of that was pretty small. And for whatever reason, he just decided to give me an opportunity. It's not like he was going to call up, say, a Craig O'Neill at Little Rock, Arkansas, and say, "Hey, come to Dermot and work for KXSA." So he had to kind of farm and grow his own talent. So he, all of us were local. He drew on local people who had zero radio experience, none whatsoever. I remember the first time I sat down in front of a big 12-channel audio board. It was a 12-channel Gates audio board with the rotopots and everything. And I was blown away from the technical aspect of it to the performance aspect of it. But it takes people like him to give you a chance. And there was another man who really put me in front of the microphone for the first time. His name was Jimmy Parkerson. And Jimmy was Mr. Baseball in Dermot. He mowed the field. He built the press box. It wasn't a press box. It was just an announcer's box on top of the concession stand. He procured the uniforms every year for all the teams. I mean, he did everything. And he recently passed. I just learned that the other day. God rest his soul. But I remember talking to him one day, and I used to do impressions of, you remember Skip Carey? Used to do play-by-play for the Braves. I used to do impressions of Skip and Ernie all the time, because I grew up a huge Braves fan. And I did it for him one day, and he said, "You should come up to the box and just announce the players when they come up." So I take the lineup card. I'm 10 years old. And I'm talking into this CB microphone, and my voice changed when I was 9 anyway. I don't know why. So I'm talking in this thing, and announcing all these batters and these T-ballers. I didn't know it at the time, but I was told later, they felt like big leaguers because this big voice was coming out of the two little speakers, So Jimmy gave me my start. Larry really kind of pushed me in the right direction. And, there's been a lot of people along the way that have, for whatever reason, taken an interest in me and fostered what interest they saw that I had in the industry.
Those are two awesome stories of opportunity. And,
Yeah.
what great men those two fellows are.
Oh, God.
Because that second story is just awesome. You never know what that little bit of confidence for those T-ballers, what that did for them later in life. It's just a great gift to give to a community, to make sure it's got a team sports like baseball, and then to give a gift like that to you and then to everybody else. I don't know. I just love that story.
It was such a great time for me because, after I got into high school, I was doing the junior high basketball or junior high football games. Even when I was in junior high school, my athletic director, Willie Parker, who's one of the all-time great basketball coaches in the state of Arkansas, he's in the Hall of Fame, as a matter of fact. He gave me the chance to do the starting lineups for his basketball team. And when it came to sports, football was second in Durban. Basketball was everything. And I mean, it was nothing for that little gym with a capacity of 650 to have 750 on a Friday night or a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
So I'm in there, and I'm the guy, amping up the Chicago Bulls in 1985. I'm standing down on the sidelines with the team because God knows Willie Parker did not want me playing basketball at all. That's a promise. And, just the little opportunities like that. I mean, it still makes those moments still make the hair stand up on my arms a little bit. Even right now, I can feel that and what that felt like to be in front of a crowd and to be a part of something like that.
Yeah.
And even those players, the older players, would tell me, man, that is the coolest thing in the world. Nobody else does this, not in Arkansas. It just doesn't happen, So it was a lot of fun. And I've really tried my best to encourage both my daughters to, find something you enjoy and, have those moments and have those memories, and you won't think of your job as drudgery ever.
Now, you in high school, did you play football?
I did.
What position?
Let's see, we had 24 guys on the team. So I was a backup quarterback, backup defensive end. I played tight end every now and then. I got thrown in as a fullback slot back once, and they figured out that wasn't a good idea. And I found my calling because of my extreme speed and athletic ability. I was a place kicker. That's what I was best at. And that's what took me to college, to Arkansas State.
All right. So you kicked for Arkansas State.
Yes, sir.
Now, what year?
87, 88, 89.
Okay.
87 redshirt year. I got to watch another all-time great, Scott Roper, play there in 1987.
Well, then I watched you play because I know Memphis played you.
Oh yeah,
in those years, and I went to all those games, and it's
and we got Memphis this year. They're in the Jones Boogie. That's going to be a good time.
That will be a good time. I've done that. Well, I did that. I've gone up there for basketball games back in the day. It's been a while, but I grew up in West Memphis,
right?
And my wife grew up in Hughes, and so we have a lot of friends up in Jonesboro, and we know a lot of people that went to ASU, and so it's always a good rivalry between ASU and Memphis whenever they play. And for a long time in football, ASU had our number. There's no doubt about that. So
well, I'm going to tell you this: the biggest mistake, and I don't want to get us too far off the path here. The biggest mistake the University of Memphis ever made was not getting our head coach Larry Lacewell, because he wanted that job.
Yeah,
and they passed him over. That was the biggest mistake, and Memphis would have had a completely different trajectory under Larry, because Larry was not only a talent scout, he was a great football mind. I mean, you're talking about the guy who invented the Okie 52 defense at the University of Oklahoma.
Right.
I mean, he could stop a freight train with two guys. So that was a mistake. But man, I loved Arkansas. Matter of fact, I've got a daughter at Arkansas State right now.
Do you really? That's cool.
Yeah, she's a junior.
So what did you major in?
Journalism, broadcast
So
communications.
you were actively working I'm going to be a sports broadcaster angle.
Absolutely. and I became one.
Yes.
I did it after I left football in 1989 because clearly I could kick it a long way, but I just wasn't super accurate. Accuracy helps in that job.
You really need both.
Yeah,
as the bartender said in the Blues Brothers, we got both kinds of music here, country and Western.
Right, exactly.
You need the length, but you also need it to go through the goalposts. That's right.
Look, the best times of my life, literally, and I talk about them, I still dream about them all the time, were playing for that football team and playing in that organization. But probably the best decision I ever made professionally was to leave football and go get not one, not two, but 3 jobs immediately. I worked for a local radio station there in Jonesboro. I worked for the TV station as a production assistant. And I also did, I call that a third job. I did some work at different ad agencies, voiceover work at the TV station. So I really just immersed myself in it. And yeah, I was well on my path to take over for, Brent Musburger, at least in my mind.
Right.
And I finished up there, majored in journalism, with a minor in political science. And I was convinced to do the minor in political science because I didn't know what else to minor in, and you had to have a minor. And later on that paid off once I made the switch into news. But I immediately went into sports, and I went to Montgomery, Alabama for 3 years, Huntsville, Alabama for 4 years, really 4.5, almost 5 years. I did 8 total years in the state of Alabama, and just, I hate to overuse the word immersed, but I immersed myself in the SEC. I learned everything there was to know about SEC football. And I got to cover, very closely 2 great programs in both Alabama and Auburn. And I got to watch, Gene Stallings and his national championship in the Superdome in New Orleans. I got to watch, the magic that was Pat Dye as it faded. I got to see Terry Bowden and his, magical undefeated season at Auburn that didn't count because of NCAA violations.
Right.
As a matter of fact, it was my boss in Montgomery who broke the story about Eric Ramsey that spurred that investigation that shut down the Auburn football program and kept them out of a bowl for 2 years. So I just got, an immediate baptism by fire. And, I still remember some of the loudest sounds I ever heard, were at Legion Field, or they were in Knoxville and Neyland Stadium. Those were the 2 biggest stadiums on the planet at the time. And, just
they
some of
still
those.
play football in Knoxville?
I'm sorry?
Do they still play football in Knoxville, kind of as a?
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Kind of as a nostalgic thing.
I can't talk bad about Tennessee because a lot of the assistant coaches at Arkansas State that I got to play under went on and worked there at Tennessee. Tim Keene, on defense. Coach Caldwell was there. There was a couple of different guys. So I can't talk too badly about Tennessee, but I know what you're talking about.
Well, love to kick them when they're down.
As a Brad, I get that.
I've always, I grew up a Memphis fan, mm-hmm. and my dad, huge Tiger fan, and he inculcated in me such an aversion to that school on the other side of the state, sure. That I did the same thing for my kids, and I didn't realize what a terrible financial miscalculation that was, because none of them wanted to go to Knoxville, where they got in-state tuition. My oldest son went to Arkansas. My daughter is at DePaul right now.
I'm sorry, your oldest son went where?
Arkansas, the University of Arkansas. It's on the other side of the state. Being from Jonesboro, you probably don't know where it is.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the University of. Oh, wait a minute. Is that the team that they're about to kick out of the SEC again? I know who you're talking about. Yeah. That team that refused to play us until they finally signed a contract to play us in 2025.
Yes.
Yeah, I got you.
Exactly.
I got a few YouTube videos I want to share with you offline. So.
Okay. All right. But my point is, none of them, you go to, now my son, Charlie, is at, and pardon me for cursing, is at UT Chattanooga.
Uh-huh.
But he wouldn't go, he wouldn't do the other one. So, that was a bad miscalculation on my part. But it's funny, particularly in the South, how those alliances, those allegiances, how they bleed over into everything.
Absolutely, they do. Absolutely everything.
Well, let me ask you this.
Sure.
What do you think about the Texas-Oklahoma conference shift?
I think my wife is a huge football fan, and she brought it up to me the other day when it first broke. She said, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's not something I've studied. I'm kind of out of the real ins and outs of the sports world. But I honestly I think Oklahoma could be, a top tier competitor in the SEC. In every sport, no, I don't think so. But in football, I think we could see them, upper echelon, at least the top four. The University of Texas, I really believe, God bless them, and I have no ill will to the University of Texas or Oklahoma, but just speaking objectively, I personally think that Texas has struggled for so long for relevance. I believe that you're going to see them probably get equal footing with something like a Texas A&M, Arkansas. No offense to my brothers at Mississippi State, because I almost went to Mississippi State. I thought about that school long and hard, but I don't see Texas as someone who's going to contend very often. I think they'll probably find that magic bullet every now and then, and they'll have those flashes of brilliance that they have. The thing that Texas does, I believe, is there is a legacy of credibility just within that program. And if you kind of take an all-encompassing look at the University of Texas, I mean, from swimming to baseball to basketball, I think that they're a big kid. I think that they still sell a lot of TV ad revenue as well. So financially, it makes a ton of sense for both schools, for the fan bases. I don't know that, anybody in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or Starkville, Mississippi, or Gainesville, Florida is going to be super hyped up about playing Texas. I don't. I could see Texas as maybe a one-off as Missouri every now and then, but I don't see Texas as being super relevant.
Well, it's interesting. I think the people our age, I think, tend to have that reaction because we remember Texas of the 70s.
And we remember Darrell Royal and Earl Campbell, and oh yeah, absolutely.
And it was the program in Texas. I mean, it was the game. It was the only game in town. And the interesting debate that I'm hearing among younger fans is whether or not Texas is able to co-opt all of A&M's power and flip that script, because now all the blue chippers in now that really dates me calling a five-star a blue chipper.
Yeah.
All the 5 stars in Texas will now want to go to Texas over A&M because now they can play in the SEC. And I just think it's one of those things. It's kind of like Notre Dame. Kids growing up now just don't know the story. Right. They don't know the history. They're not as relevant. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Texas, I think.
Yeah, I think, and I get that sentiment that, if they're weighing strictly between Texas and Texas A&M, maybe, but, a real 5-star athlete, he's either playing for Nick Saban or, someone like that. Yeah. So I don't know that, again, I think they're going to be going after a lot of, obviously a lot of 5-star kids, because there are the ones that are going to have that allegiance. But I don't know that they're going to be able to find that it matters over time when you're going up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think, to me, and I'll get on my soapbox and I'll get off real quick. But to me, one of the most un-American things about American sports.
The designated hitter?
Well, that's another story. No, the American League is interesting. It's not baseball, but it's interesting.
Exactly.
Although both leagues are going to that next year or the year after. But it is the fact that and as a Memphis fan and even Arkansas State fan, you're right there. Arkansas State and Memphis and Alabama are all in the same division. But Memphis and Arkansas State is not in the same league.
Oh, no. And can't
be. There's not the same opportunity for advancement that you have in every, in basketball. Any team can win a national championship if you're in Division I. There's a pathway to it. It's just not that way in football, and to me, it's un-American. And I just see it tightening up even more. And it will be interesting if we come out of all of this with 4 super conferences and who the haves and have-nots will be. And
that's what you're going to wind up with.
Yeah. And I'm just not looking forward to it because it's going to relegate a lot of really good schools, a lot of really good fan bases to second-class citizenship when I don't think they deserve it.
No, I don't disagree with that. By the same token, even though my allegiances are to, a school the size of Arkansas State, who has competed so well, especially over the past decade, and even back when I played, we were 1AA when I played, and nobody wanted to see us come to town, especially, excuse me, Ole Miss, but you hated us for several reasons, which we beat you up quite often. But it's market forces.
Oh, I know.
Look, the biggest joke and the biggest farce in the world is to ever say that college sports, specifically college football and college basketball, are amateur athletics. They haven't been, since the late 60s. I'm sorry, they just haven't. The advent of television and the revenue ad dollar has changed the landscape of sports and did it 50 years ago. This is nothing new. The fact that we're just now getting to a point where young men or young women are going to be compensated for the use of their name, image, and likeness. This is something that should have happened 30 years ago. Does that mean they should get, a fat check from a school? I don't know what it looks like. I've never had an idea of what it looks like, but I've never thought that it was fair that, a few dozen fat cats. I think the Kansas City used to be the home of the NCAA. Where are they? Indianapolis now? Indianapolis. A few fat cats in Kansas City, and all the top tier athletic directors made a lot of money, and nobody else did.
Yeah.
And it's all on the backs of those young men and women who literally pour their heart and soul into this. And this was long before, the 20-hour-a-week rule, which that's kind of like saying, the speed limit's 55 as well. If you think that these guys and these women are only working out and practicing their craft 20 hours a week. So, market forces have come to bear, and I think that this was foreseen many, many years ago. David Housel, a former athletic director at Auburn, saw something like this coming. He used to speak about it. And there are several others who, foresaw all of this. Mark Emmert was one of them. I think when he was at Auburn, even though he was the president at the time, he saw, many of these things coming to fruition. So I don't think that this should be a shock or a surprise to anyone. And as much as I loathe the fact that, as you said, teams like us, teams like Memphis, even the Boise States, the University of Utah, they're not going to be able to compete in these super conferences. They're just not. UTEP, great schools, class schools. They're not going to be able to compete with Alabama, Ohio State, USC when all of these super conferences do come around. They're not going to have the money. They're not going to have the facilities, and they're not going to be able to draw the 5+ star athlete. They're eventually going to have to add another star. The guys are getting so good. So I agree with you that it's sad, but this is just a gradual shift that has been a long time coming because of market forces.
Yeah, I agree. Let me shift gears on you a little bit.
Yes, sir.
I always like to ask people who do things that I think I would like to do, but am not qualified to do. Okay. What's the coolest thing? What's the coolest thing you ever covered as a sports reporter? You just looked around and said, "Man, I'm here." Wow. The late Mike Fleming, just while you're thinking, I'll tell you this story. I don't think I've told it on the podcast before, but the great Mike Fleming used to tell me that back in the day, they let the press corps play Augusta National the day after the match. And he said, for 10 years straight, I got to play Augusta National. And he said, in the same conditions as the pros. He said, it's just the day after.
Yeah, I was going to say it's Monday. It was Monday after the tournament. And
it was the next day. So it was,
they didn't stop that until recently.
Yeah. So he said that was really one of the coolest things I've ever done. What was the coolest thing that you have ever done that you got to do because of your job?
God, Alan, there's a lot of them. I remember the first Alabama-Tennessee game I ever covered and being on the field at Legion Field, and I was just talking about how the hair stood up on my arms because it was so loud. I'd never heard anything that loud. So, that was a cool moment. I remember the Braves' first World Series. I was working in Alabama at the time, and we used to go over and cover the Braves on a regular basis. And I got credentials, and I was like, my God, I'm at a World Series, the 96 Olympics. I got to, I was an NBC or part of an NBC affiliate in Huntsville, Alabama. And we did a lot of work, not only for our TV station, but also for NBC News Channel, meaning that I got to report for a lot of different stations and bring them coverage from the Olympics. As a matter of fact, one of the most frightening times of my life in sports, because I've had a lot of frightening times in news, was the Olympic bombing. I was 2 blocks away when the bomb went off. And we did not hear the bomb. We were walking into a hotel because it was the midway point in the Olympics that Friday night. And I remember a producer coming out and screaming, "There's a bomb, there's a bomb, there's a bomb." And we're like, "What are you talking about?" Because we weren't going to a big conference room where they had, beer and pizza and everything, because it was the halfway point. We were just going to hang out. And it's like 1 a.m. and we had just got off work. And, we finally got some of the details. Well, they had not parked our car yet. We ran back outside, jumped in our car. We still had gear. We got as close as we possibly could. And this was before all the blue lights got there. We go running through the main gates to Centennial Park. They had huge double gates on this one entrance. I think it was the north entrance. And we go running through, and these people are flooding out, and we're running in. And I'm thinking to myself, why are we running in when everybody else is running out? And I remember talking to this one kid, and I say kid, teenager, who his buddies were helping him along. And I'm like, what happened? And my photographer who was there with me, Doug Shores, flipped on his light. And I'm talking to this guy, and he said, I don't know. There was an explosion, and you could see there was mud up his back and this way. And all of a sudden he opened his hand, and he had these 2 huge square, like 10-penny nails in his hand that were covered in blood. And he said, "I pulled these out of the back of my leg. They were in his calf." He had pulled them out of the back of his calf. And it was about that time that we used to call them the black suits. They had security guards who were, they were international, but all they had, just said police and polici and like 10 different languages, police on it. They came and they were shoving everybody out of the park. And we took what we had. We shot some more video. We got what we could get. We go back to the Roxy, which was where we were based. And we're, cutting video. And I'm looking around. I'm like, we're the only ones in here. And the other producers were coming over like, where have you guys been? What is this about the bombing? What's going on? I'm talking to them, and they're like, "Well, you're up. You're the only one we've got." Wow. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So next thing I know, I'm live in Philadelphia at 2 a.m. And then I was in New York twice on WNBC until their people were able to get in. A lot of people, because it was the midway point, we kind of had the next day off. Everybody just kind of scattered. Yeah. And I remember going to sleep finally Sunday afternoon, just after lunch. So that was, more than 24 hours. It was, that was pretty insane. Wow. I've done everything from the College World Series to the Real World Series to 3 or 4 different football national championships, a couple of Super Bowls. I did, for 2 years, I worked for the NFL on Fox. I did sidelines for the NFL on Fox. That's before they started using, dedicated reporters. They always had dedicated reporters for like Pam Oliver was she was the big game. That was the A team. Yeah. But they used different, local guys on a rotating basis to go to, who wants to see Cleveland play the Dolphins on December 19th in Cleveland in the mud when nobody's playing for anything. Well, I got to go do that one. Yeah. So I've done a lot of cool things where I've had to sit there, pinch myself and say, this is really cool. And, I for whatever reason, I've always kind of stopped and took a look around and really kind of appreciated where I was. And maybe it's because I came from, a little town in the middle of nowhere. I never took any of that for granted.
That's cool. That's cool. And, you're very fortunate to do what you love and to have, set out to be something and then to accomplish it and be it.
Yeah. I feel like I looked into it all the time. I really do. I mean, there, but by the grace of God, did any of this happen to me?
Right.
I believe you can create a lot of your own opportunities, but you can walk down as many hallways as you want until a door opens. You're really not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. So, I'm very fortunate.
Well, let me ask you this: you're now the anchor of a news broadcast in Memphis, and I think again a lot of us really have no idea what that really means, on a daily basis. I know you just don't come out and read a teleprompter. What goes into your preparation for a broadcast?
You have to fall back on the fact that there are several dozen people that make it all happen, and I am fortunate enough to be that mouthpiece. That's really all I am. I'm the mouthpiece. We have producers that begin work very early in the day. We have our digital content center does exactly the same thing, and they start pulling in all this these massive amounts of information, and they start running it through filters and distilling it to find out, okay, we know because of research our viewers like A, B, and C. Well, what of these stories kind of match what our viewers want? Because think about it, there's 6,000 different avenues to find news now. So we're not going to give you everything. We're going to give you what you can't get somewhere else, or at least take what you might have to find, what you may have to go 10 different places to get, and try to amalgamate that into one central location. That's our job now. And my job begins at 1:30, usually in the afternoon. By 2 o'clock, we have an editorial meeting where they have one early as well. They have one at 9 a.m. for the day side, but I work a night side shift. So I'm part of that editorial process at 2 o'clock. That's where our news director, our digital content center, our producers all get together. They discuss what we feel are the important stories of the day. And we distill down from that point into what we're going to cover, and they're assigned to different reporters. Oftentimes I'm assigned a story too. Darrell, if you would research this, that, and the other thing, we'll pick up this interview. Now, granted, during COVID, I haven't been out in the field much at all.
Right.
They've kept us, pretty tucked away because we are around more people, and they, you lose one of us and it gets kind of hinky. So, but there was a day not too long ago where, I'm out doing a couple of stories a day, and, grabbing interviews. I've interviewed you via Zoom. Matter of fact, we really started our interview relationship during COVID.
Yeah.
And, doing a lot of the Zoom interviews, which quite frankly, it makes people like you much more accessible because, Alan, I know your days start early and they go until very late. So you're not always going to be able to carve out a 30-minute slot where I can come visit you with a camera. So anyway, back to the original story. After the editorial meeting, we have usually promotional things we have to do, promotional responsibilities. We start reading and researching stories. We then read over, what is presented to us, what we haven't written, things written by other people, whether it be reporters or producers. We fact check and grammar check all of that. And by that time, it's news time. It's amazing how quickly that 3.5 hours can fly by. And you rinse and repeat. We're on from 5 until 6:30, 90 minutes. You get, a half hour for dinner, sometimes longer, depending on how good the weather is and how close the golf course is. And then you just kind of rinse and repeat, and you do that for the nightside news from 9 till 10:30. So I'm never going to call my work hard work, but that doesn't mean I don't work hard.
Right.
Because I really enjoy what I do. I enjoy communicating with people. I enjoy making what can be rather complicated stories less complicated for the average person who isn't as immersed in the daily grind as we are and we have to be, and just distilling that information. But one of the things that I get all the time is the bias of the media. And while you may find that perception to be true in the national media, in the local media, it's almost impossible to detect. And we make sure of that. I can speak for myself, and I can speak for Fox 13. And knowing so many of the journalists, at the other 3 stations here, I would be shocked if it happens any other way. There is no bias in what we do. We cover literally the news of the day. The news presents itself, and we're giving you facts. We're not giving you facts as we see them. We're giving you the facts as presented to us, and we're just distilling that information down and making it more edible for you. You got to think about us as chefs or cooks. A lot of food comes into the kitchen, but until the chef puts some fire to it, there's not much you can do with it.
Yeah.
You can only do so much to a potato. And when you cook a potato, it's still a potato by the time it goes in your mouth.
Right.
We just make it more edible. That's it.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this last night. I remember when I was growing up, Jack Eaton was the sports legendary sports broadcaster at Channel 5. And I don't know why I remember this, but he would have all the baseball scores. As he was going to commercial, he would say, now here's what happened in Major League Baseball today, and they'd show all the scores. And I thought, local news doesn't bother with that now, as you say, because you can get the ball scores just about anywhere. It's really more it's really more local than it is the national stories.
And it's funny because that's the way it started. Local radio stations popped up, or local newspapers popped up, local radio stations popped up, and they covered their corner of the world. And then because of, the advent of different technologies, they were, different information was made available to them on a regional basis, then a national basis. And then, all of a sudden people they were more well-read and they understood these things. And then along come the networks. And then you're getting these, you get a much larger footprint with a much, smaller commitment with the network, right? And now it's almost like we're regressing, but to me, regressing in the best way possible. Because we are so hyper-focused on Memphis and the Mid-South, we're not devoting resources and time to things that you probably either A, don't find interesting, or B, you can absolutely get somewhere else from someone else who's doing it better because they're there. All of that is so available literally in the palm of your hand now. So I think it's up to us to make sure that we're giving you what you want from us. You can get different things in different places, but to get the hyper local coverage, you're only going to get that from a local TV station. CBS News, Fox News, they're not going to come to Memphis unless it's really, really bad. They never come when it's good or otherwise. Yeah. So I think that's what, it behooves us to do that. And I think it behooves the viewer to pay attention to us as we're doing that, because we're your only source for that.
Do you think, if you project out 5 or 10 years from now, do you think that an organization like Fox 13 Memphis will be a multimedia broadcaster, for lack of a better way to put it? It's probably an industry term for it that I just don't know. But I thought when the internet started, circa, I say started, when I first became aware of the internet, in the late 90s, I thought that the newspapers would own it, because newspapers have got content. And what did the internet need at that point? They needed print content. Video wasn't nearly as important to the internet then as content, written content. And they, for whatever reason, weren't able to convert. How about your industry? Do you think that how is traditional television?
Oh no, we already are
going to respond to all of that.
We already are. I work for Cox Media Group, and Cox I've worked for Cox Media Group since 2007. As a matter of fact, I began with them at Orlando, at WFTV Channel 9. And one thing that we were very focused on there, which it was new to me, because coming from New Orleans, at the Fox affiliate in New Orleans, the internet was a thing and we had a website, but it was kind of viewed as just a thing and a website, to where Cox and a couple of other industry leaders really came in and said, this can be something very special, because there's going to come a time where the internet's going to be streamed right into your head. Now, they didn't say that. They didn't say that specifically, but I think they meant hand anyway.
Yeah.
And because of the foresight of that, they developed user-friendly websites, and they figured out, video compression techniques, and they figured out how to put video on your phone and how to watch the news on your phone live, how to carry channel 13 with you on your phone or on your tablet. Our website is I'd put it up against anybody's. Our Facebook page, we have, I'd have to look it up. It's like 650,000 followers, by far more than anybody in town. And our digital footprint here is very, very, very impressive. And it has become, and it has been for quite some time, a multimedia industry. We started doing every story that I write, I don't want to say feature story, but every news story that I'm responsible for producing, I have to write a web script for it. It goes to the web, and there's usually video with it, whether that be from the newscast itself or for something else that we've otherwise pre-produced. I mean, we do produce some digital only content that never sees the light of day on television. And I think that it's been that way for a while, and I think it's going to continue to trend that way. I think that leads you to the natural question of, well, will television ever go away? I don't know. I don't know that broadcast television will go away. It might. Those may be the words that come back to haunt me in 10 years. I hope it's at least 13 years because I retire in 13 years. But I have seen so much change in our industry from typing, on a Selectric typewriter to a 7-ply script where you could, pop the top and it's 7 scripts pop out of the same thing, 7 carbon copies.
Yeah.
All the way to, laser printers to now, iPads. We don't even print paper anymore. Everything is downloaded to an iPad and we carry it out there with us. So I can definitely say that we are already well-versed in the multimedia universe. And that's why I refer to, we used to call it the assignment desk. Well, now it's a digital content center because it's a multi-platform center. It comes into, 2 or 3 people and is disseminated to our website, to our Facebook page, to our Twitter followers, over to our producers, to our reporters out in the field, everywhere. And just the very nature of the fact that communication one-to-one has changed so much, you would naturally see it change in the broadcast industry.
What I hate to quit. I hate to keep switching gears, but we're running out of time. What do you think has been the most significant story you've covered in Memphis in the last 5 or 10 years?
Oh, definitely. I would say there are a couple. The protests, the bridge specifically. I think that was part of a national awakening. That wasn't Memphis specific, but it was in Memphis specifically. Because if you look at what has happened in Memphis, and we talk so much, you and I, everyone, including people outside of Memphis, talk about what a violent city Memphis is. I've got a couple of things to say to that. Yes, there's violence in Memphis. But when you look at the protests that have happened here and the marches, there really weren't that many protests in Memphis. There were a lot of marches. When you think of protest, typically that lends itself to a step above a march and something akin to, anger and usually violence. In a year and a half of marches, we had a shoe store with a window broken. That was it. Mm-hmm. And you look at what happened in the rest of the nation, I think you have to applaud the people of Memphis, because that type of march and that type of outspokenness and that type of please hear me and see me, its roots are here. It started here. This is where it all began. And I believe that Memphis has done very well in that regard. The other most important story that I've covered in Memphis has to be the continued violence. And I have zero answer for that. But I will tell you this. I've worked in 2 other major cities, in New Orleans and Orlando, neither of which is any different. They're not. Are they reported on the same? Absolutely, by the media. In Orlando, not that many people watch television. So here they do. Memphis's violence is no worse, no better than Orlando, than New Orleans, than Minneapolis, than Detroit, than Boston. It's just not. Statistically speaking, okay, per capita, you can use all of that you want, but the same intrinsic things that cause the violence in those cities are the ones that cause violence here. And that's lack of education and lack of opportunity. Lack of education to me is absolutely the number one cause of violence. Because I remember a conversation I had with George Little, who was with the city of Memphis for many, many years. And he told me, he said, Darrell, you got to understand, because I was doing a story about reading and about the fact that people aren't reading. People do not read. I'm like, why don't they read? Who can't read? What do you mean you can't read? Why is reading important? He said, Darrell, we take 3rd grade reading levels every year in the state of Tennessee, and we compute those and extrapolate them over time. And that tells us how many prison beds we're going to need 10 years from now, because if you can't read, you've got no shot. And, I don't like to play the blame game. What do you blame the educators? Do you blame the parents? What system do you blame? I don't know, but I know something has to be done. And I think we should all do it, whatever that is, to help it. Because sitting around wringing our hands and pointing fingers does zero good. There's nothing more important than opportunity. And, that goes back to the first story I told you. I could be in South Arkansas right now and be very happy doing something very different. But without the opportunities that I've had, without the open doors, and without two parents who valued education, and without educators who valued what they were doing with us and us as students, and without an entire community who literally, you and I grew up in the same era where if you were 10 blocks from the house and doing something, your mom and dad knew it before anybody else did because somebody called them. Without that sort of it takes a village mentality, I don't know where we go. I don't know. Like I said, there's no way, Ms. Davis, Cyril Davis, the new police chief, has said this many times in her brief tenure here. You can't arrest your way out of this problem. You cannot. But I firmly believe that we could start now and save the next generation. I'm not saying this generation is lost, but we could save ourselves a lot of harm if somehow, some way we could figure out a better way to communicate the importance and the value of education to the kids who are in the second grade right now. So when they do get to the third grade, they're not viewed as a statistic a decade from now. I just don't know how to get there. It's going to take a lot of really, really intelligent people getting together, throwing politics to the side and saying, this is important. And this has to be important to all of us, because whether everyone around Memphis likes it or not, as Memphis goes, so do you. All of the smaller communities around Memphis, and when I say smaller, if you have fewer than 685,000 residents, you're smaller than Memphis. Right. All of the communities that are smaller than Memphis around Memphis are beholden to Memphis, because without them, they wouldn't be where they are. There would not be a FedEx. There wouldn't be an international paper. There wouldn't be a Helena Chemical Company. There wouldn't be these big time, financial players who do employ people. Amazon wouldn't be here. AutoZone would probably be somewhere in the Midwest. So, I hate to be the one to say kumbaya, but please, God, can we put all of it aside and just do something for each other?
I'll tell you, this may be a good note to end on, because it reaches back and brings forward a concept we talked about at the very beginning. We need more Jimmy, what was his name?
Jimmy Parkinson.
We need more Jimmy Parkinson, who will mentor young people.
Absolutely.
Read to kids in the second grade, help them learn to read, but just, take your little corner of the world and find some kids who need that role model, who need that opportunity to see beyond what they're doing now. Mike Rollins, when he was police director, he used to talk all the time about the fact that one of the reasons why the gang recruitment is so prevalent in our city is they start with kids in grade school and, go to their ball games and become their friends, become their role models. And there's nobody competing with that oftentimes. And that, that cuts across neighborhoods and everything else. And so if you can find somebody to mentor, you provide some Jimmy, what I'm going to start calling Jimmy moments, yeah, where you do something for one kid that has a benefit for all other kids. Yeah, you're not going to change the world, but if we all did that, the world will change.
You're exactly right, because you know what? The one thing, and I'm the same way now, and I'm 52 years old. The one thing that matters most to me is that someone cares about me. I need one person. I need one person to care about me.
Yeah.
And I'm okay. That's it. And so many of these young men and young women do not have that. And they're going in search of that. And as you just said, they find it in the wrong place. And that can happen whether that be in Memphis or in Munford or in Dermot, Arkansas.
That's right.
And it doesn't have to be a gang member either. It only takes one bad apple, to literally rot the whole tree, if you will, instead of just the barrel. So I think it is important to us to do our best to take those moments, seize those moments. And it's something I do. I don't mentor a ton of younger people, but I do try to mentor, at least within my industry, within my, sphere of influence, if you will. And I've had the opportunity to work with some young men over time through sports. One of them, did okay. He's got a few Pro Bowl jerseys hanging up in his closet. Mm-hmm. He was a really good punter. And, to have that one person in your life who you think that person cares, I think I'll be okay if I can find that one person. So you're dead on. You can't change the world, but I think all of us together can. You're right.
I'm a firm believer in that. And I think let's end it on that note. That's a good note to end it on. And
sure.
Darrell, I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. I hope everybody else did. I mean, it was a great conversation. If you've enjoyed
a good time.
Please share us on social media. And if you receive this by email, forward it on to somebody else. Darrell, I sure appreciate your time and your
absolutely, my friend.
And Darrell is going to go out and report the news, and I'm going to go out and get some justice.
Sounds good.
Darrell, thank you so much, and call on me anytime. Always happy to help.
All right, Alan, take care. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.